Hello, everybody. How's it going? It is that time of the league to start looking for our league starter. And instead of doing what I usually do, where I kind of just go in the hole, well, I do it on stream, but I kind of just go in the hole on stream and we experiment like crazy, don't document any of it. I wanted to bring you guys on YouTube along for the journey, kind of go through the process, the rubric that I'm using to understand or judge whether the build is going to be something that shapes up. Because when it comes to league starters, we have a certain bar, particularly in the past year or so. The bar for what a good league starter is in terms of budget, in terms of offense, in terms of defense, ease of putting it together. If you are looking up a league starter, you're probably looking for something that's beginner friendly. More advanced players are just going to go to PoE Ninja and, do whatever. So there's a certain way that I try to get the league starters that I think are very solid. The amount of work that it takes to make one of these league starters is it's obscene. It is the hardest thing that I've done professionally. It's up there in my whole life. It's definitely up there, but it's very rewarding. I still get people in my chat, like just last night, we had someone come in the chat, like a few people actually, saying, hey, I just started a couple weeks ago. I guess they're late to the league. Maybe last epoch's getting them in. But yeah, like, hey, I'm playing your SRS league starter. It's really good. Thank you, etc. Very rewarding. And I just want to share with you guys, this process and this journey and document it on YouTube. And I've already gone through two and a half-ish builds. And I want to talk about, neither one has passed the bar for me yet, but I want to talk about my process, what I went through, what it felt like as I was leveling it up, and what it felt like getting to the end game. Stuff that I experimented with. A lot of the detail will be missing because you can go and watch on twitch.tv/subtractem. It takes many, many hours, but I'll just try to give you guys the high level breakdown of what I was exploring. At the end of the day, really, these builds are all kind of okay. The two builds that I'm going to talk about. So I guess we'll just stop bearing the lead here. I tried both Bama and Stormbrand. Bama on both Necromancer and Guardian, Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow, but basically just Blink Arrow. We'll talk about that in a second. And then Stormbrand, I tried it on an Inquisitor, but yeah, that was okay. And those are the two builds we're going to talk about, as well as what I'm looking at in the future. So let's get some gameplay footage on the stream and start talking about it. All right, so first up is the Blink Arrow, Mirror Arrow, Necromancer / Guardian. So the basic idea here is we are using the Blink Arrow of bombarding clones, which will, instead of the regular Blink Arrow that just does a regular basic attack, essentially, it will instead cast a rain of arrows. You can have up to 3 of these out at a time, and this is basically my primary complaint about it. You can have 3 of them at a time. It is shared between Blink Arrow and Mirror Arrow, so you pretty much just use Blink Arrow. There's no reason to use both. It will use your bow and quiver, so the core behind it is you want to roll up. It's kind of an attack minion setup because it's using your bow and quiver to do the rain of arrows. So you do want to craft a good bow and quiver, primarily going for lots of flat damage, attack speed, just a good bow in general. And then you can have 3 of them out at a time. So you also get the benefit of doing minion scaling. You can get the minion attack speed, attack damage. You can go into things like Spiritual Command and Redemption and do all of the regular nodes for scaling your minions, as well as things like Grave Pact, get chance to deal double damage. And then it's also using your attack. So it's kind of a hybrid setup there, which is kind of interesting. And then because we're a Necromancer, which I think is probably the best class to play it as, you get a lot of additional attack speed and damage for your minions, as well as great defense for yourself. Being able to have your offerings also affect you. Now, this build in a league start budget, first week budget, trying to keep things as low as possible, was very playable. It was decent. I was able to do T16 maps relatively comfortably, and I was able to kill the pinnacle bosses okay. The playstyle here is you need to Blink Arrow 3 times to get them on the screen. You can't convocate them. They are temporary minions, so convocation does not work, and you are just doing your Blink Arrow as quickly as possible. You want to get as much cooldown recovery rate as possible, and then scale that damage as much as you can. The most annoying thing about this that I think really holds it back from being an exceptional league starter is the pathing on the passive tree. Unfortunately, for it to feel acceptable in terms of the comfort, because you need to do Blink Arrow, it has a cooldown. To do Blink Arrow 3 times, to trigger it on the bosses to get your max damage, you need to take the Bow Mastery for 100% cooldown recovery rate on your Blink Arrow and Mirror Arrow. It's a little bit easier for the Guardian setup because the Templar's a little bit closer. He doesn't have to path as far, but still, if you want the regular Witch comfort passive nodes, particularly if you want spell suppression and additional curse like Whispers of Doom and Instinct, then your pathing gets really, really awkward, and you have this huge stretch going all the way down to Avatar of the Hunt to try to get that cooldown recovery rate, which is really mandatory to have some comfort as you're playing the build. My biggest complaint with this is the playstyle while you're mapping is it's just janky. You have a cooldown based skill that is your movement skill, but the damage is very delayed. The minion takes a second to cast the rain of arrows, then it's another second before the rain of arrows lands on the ground. The enemies on the map might not be standing right there. You have to cast it 3 times, so it's going to take like 2, 3, 4 seconds to ramp up your single target damage or like decent damage in a single location. So there's this real awkward backtracking that you have to do. Now, this can get fixed a little bit, so you can do blink arrow, mirror arrow, and then just get 2 of your minions on the screen right away. That helps a ton. However, you either need to 6-link another skill, or you can double 5-link your blink arrow, mirror arrow, which is okay. Once you get to high enough damage, you can go for like a double 5-link setup in your body armor or your bow, wherever you put it. Then you could gem swap for a boss. You take out the mirror arrow and put in a damage gem. And that's an okay way to do it. It just didn't feel incredible to me because you have to stretch so far on the passive tree. I really found at very low league start investment, like I could tell that this was a good build. Like if I was able to throw 30 divines at this, I could see it would be a very, very solid build. I still wouldn't love the playstyle, but if we're talking in a very early league start scenario, just a few days into the league, it's just not quite there for, SSF scaling into killing your Quest Exarch and Eater really, really quickly. The damage is just so delayed and so awkward, particularly, because you have this really long pathing. Again, this long path down to Avatar of the Hunt just feels so bad when you're going through all of these dead nodes until you hit something usable just to get the quality of life higher. The other problem is there's also 2 different alternate quality blink arrows. There's prismatic clones and bombarding clones, and we want the bombarding one. So even if you got the turn this gem into another of the same gem, you only have a 50-50 to hit the one that you want. So yeah, I was not in love with this skill. I see that it is powerful at higher investment, but I think in a pure league start scenario, I just don't really recommend it at a very low budget. And again, my bar is pretty high here. I am judging it against SRS Guardian and my Frostblink Elementalist. For me, those are like S tier, best in the business league starter, Bone Shatter, Detonate Dead, that type of stuff. On that tier, this really is not it, particularly because it requires a Transfigured Gem. So for me, this one is just out. I will not be playing it, but it is viable if you're willing to kind of take it a little slow and scale it up a little bit later on. Maybe just level a regular Necromancer and then, get the gem a little bit later, get 20, 30 divines. That's fine. But I didn't love the playstyle either. So yeah, I tried it. I didn't like it. All right. Next up is, unfortunately, another Transfigured Gem. But you can start with the base gem and then get the Transfigured one later. And that is Stormbrand, and then later Stormbrand of Indecision. Stormbrand is a skill that's been kind of B tier. You could even say B- tier. But with enough money thrown at it, can be an absolute monster that is very, very comfortable mechanically. And I wanted to explore whether it was viable to league start it as a top tier league starter. And unfortunately, not going to bury the lead again, it did not quite pass muster. It was really, really close, but unfortunately, I did end up shelving it. I spent the last 2 days on stream actually working on it really, really hard. There are versions of it out there that people are already playing that are relatively effective, but they don't pass the bar of what I consider an S tier league starter. So Stormbrand is a brand skill, of course, that you drop on the ground. It will attach to an enemy, and then it will do a chaining lightning attack, basically automatically casting arc on an enemy, and then it'll be chaining off of that. Stormbrand of Indecision is interesting that instead of casting an arc, essentially, that will chain to multiple enemies, it will disconnect from the base monster and then connect to another one every single time that it activates. And this is actually the same thing, but more consistent than the brand mastery that will do it once every 0.3 seconds. This has no restriction there and doesn't require you to take the mastery. So what that means is that Stormbrand will bounce between the enemies very, very quickly and have a very consistent, nice, clean clear. So normal Stormbrand will hit the main monster and do more damage, and then the chain will kind of do pretty mediocre damage. Stormbrand of Indecision will do less single target damage to the one that is connected to, but because it's bouncing around so quickly, it'll be doing, on average, more damage to higher packs of monsters or bigger packs of monsters, if that makes sense. So there is a meta of Stormbrand builds out there right now. Also, Penance Brand, I'm just going under the assumption that Penance Brand of Dissipation is getting nerfed. We're not going to talk about that. Obviously, if that skill is not nerfed, that's just going to be the meta next league. So, that's already out of the question. But for Stormbrand, I was thinking with Indecision, maybe there was a world where it would feel good enough at lower investment on league start. Anyway, there is a current meta out there for Stormbrand. There are some really hardcore Stormbrand advocates out there that just love the skill, basically like Flicker Strike players that will play it every single league, no matter what. And I wanted to see if I could kind of put my, more budget-friendly league starter approach to it, still having really solid defenses and make it feel good without all of the more advanced, expensive tricks that people are using to make Stormbrand feel good. What a lot of people are doing right now is they go into low life, using pain attunement. They go into cluster jewels very, very quickly. Some people are even doing the energy blade stuff, etc. Obviously that stuff is effective, but it is more expensive. That's already, it's one of those things where you have a slow league start. And then, hey, I saved up 10, 15, 20 divines, and then I can make a good build after that. You're happy kind of slowly running T14 maps, or moderately running T14 maps, and then you eventually have enough money that you can transition into a more endgame setup. And I wanted to see if there was something that could feel really good at a lower budget. Same thing with the Blink Arrow. So what I tried doing early on was leaning into Instruments of Virtue, which gives us Battle Mage. The cool thing here is Battle Mage with Rebuke of the Vol. You can, for very, very cheap, assuming you can acquire it early on in the league for cheap, Rebuke of the Vol gives you a ton of flat damage. Unfortunately, Stormbrand has a poor effectiveness, only 85% of added damage, so you don't get that much benefit from it, but still, it gave me enough damage where at pretty low investment, I could hit, 500 to 750k DPS, which feels really good until you hit red maps. That's an acceptable number until you hit red maps, particularly for having 100% damage uptime. It felt pretty good. However, once I got to T14, 15 red maps, trying to push higher damage started to feel pretty bad. So what I tried transitioning into is previously we were using Dark Arts with Elemental Overload and, getting advantage of as much free damage as we could while we're leveling. Also, just tossing it in there, leveling with Stormbrand, particularly when you get Stormbrand of Indecision, is some of the easiest, most fun leveling that I've ever experienced in the game. I actually made a video for it like a month ago. It is cracked how good it is. So if you want to level, feels good. You don't even need Indecision, but once you get that, it just pops off. And particularly if you grab Instruments of Virtue and you get something like Nycta's Lantern and you use a Spellblade support, you get so much damage that you are just flying through the campaign, like some of the easiest leveling you'll experience. However, once I got to red maps, I converted out of Dark Arts and out of Elemental Overload, and then I tried to do some basic power charge stacking. So went into full crit. Crit's not that bad because with Righteous Providence, just by scaling our strength and intelligence as high as possible, whatever the lowest one is, getting that as high as possible, and then just getting some power charges and the crit nodes, not that hard to approach 100% crit chance, and then just scale crit multi, power charges in general. That felt like the easiest way to scale damage while still having a passive tree that allowed me to go into defense. So that's what I ended up doing. I started getting better and better gear. We started getting into, kind of pushing the limits of what League Start budget felt like. Even with that, I struggled to get beyond like 1.5 million DPS or so without sacrificing defense. Like this is the key. So for example, things that I did is if you're a caster, basically right now, mandatory is either a really good Fizz's Taken chest, which is, harder for beginners to craft, or Cloak of Flame or Lightning Coil. Because we need 5 to 6 blue sockets, Lightning Coil is very difficult, and so I went with Cloak of Flame. And then even with relatively nicely crafted scepters, I was using Yoke of Suffering, which I think is kind of mid here, but it'll be cheap and easy to get. And I just couldn't hit a damage number that I was happy with. Yellow maps and early red maps felt spectacular, even with very, very low investment. But unfortunately, I just hit a wall. I wasn't letting myself get to higher budget or do any of the more expensive stuff. Not being able to get the damage above about 1.5 million DPS I had 90% spell suppression. I had, decent defense, trying to have at least 10 to 12k Fizz max hit. I wasn't able to balance all of those things in a way that was budget friendly and still was able to push the damage numbers to something that I found acceptable. All right, and those are the two main builds that I tested. I do want to show you guys really quickly some other stuff that I was looking at. So I was looking also at Arc of Surging right here. This is a very broken skill right now that pretty much gets like 9x the damage because we're assuming that it's bugged right now. It was banned in the gauntlet. Basically gets 9x the damage because the additional split, I believe, is being able to chain to the same single target with like a hydrosphere. And so this has a broken amount of damage. I couldn't mechanically make it feel as good as I wanted to on an Inquisitor, but I didn't put a lot of work into it. Probably the right way to play this is just do it on a Trickster, have, all of the really, really free defense, and then you can focus on your offense a little bit more. But yeah, Arc of Surging, if it isn't nerfed, is going to be giga broken. Definitely watch out for that. The other one that I was looking at was Cold Snap of Power, which hits really, really hard. 320 effectiveness to added damage, 10% base crit chance. Really, really easy to have 100% crit on it, but it does have a cooldown, unlike the regular Cold Snap that uses Frenzy charges to bypass the cooldown. This one uses power charges and also gains power charges on critical strike. So very, very easy to sustain the power charges on this. The idea that I wanted to use here was kind of lean into fanaticism and trigger the ability to cast many, many power charges or Cold Snaps as quickly as possible. Maybe even looking into using a Pledge of Hands, Spell Echo. We're already over-generating power charges, so we're just consuming them and casting very, very quickly. Downside for that for me was just mechanically, I just don't love standing still and self-casting. With all that said, that segue, what I'm actually leaning towards is a build that I've played in the past that I think is still kind of underappreciated and underrepresented, and that is Stormburst Totems. Particularly just played on a Hierophant. You can do Mind Over Matter. You get all of the built-in damage taken as mana. You can do mana stacking, which will increase your offense and your defense at the same time. Can be a little annoying to craft because mana is just kind of annoying to get on your gear when you're crafting. But I think that's a build that, for how powerful it is, particularly if any of the borrowed power that we get in the league gives us more skill effect duration that basically scales the damage on Stormburst, or if it gives you more mana or anything, I think is that's one of those skills that is always kind of slept on that can scale to great damage, even on a pretty lower budget. So that's actually my plan, is the Inquisitor experimentation. I learned a lot. Like, I actually learned how annoying fanaticism is. This is just so clunky. You have to attack for 4 seconds, at least once every second for 4 seconds. So I thought it could be like attack once every 4 seconds and then it'll generate. But no, you have to like attack and then cast, attack and then cast, attack and then cast. And then after 4 times, then you'll get 4 seconds of just like cast. And yeah, this thing, it's so awkward. I see the power though, like definitely crazy burst damage, but really, really awkward. Inquisitor's good. Specifically, Augury of Penitence is kind of awkward. It does the same thing as Sanctuary, kind of. These two fight each other. They're way, way too similar in terms of what they do. And then Sanctuary, you're just gonna want to go into Pious Path. And then no matter what, you probably just want to get out of Instruments of Virtue. Inevitable Judgment's too good. And then you're gonna, like, I don't know. It's almost just set of what you're gonna do right there. Unless there's a world where you don't care about the ES regen, and then you can kind of just generate other consecrated ground instead of the auto-generated. Then you get a little bit value out of Augury, but yeah, Pious Path is just so nice, particularly if you're EB. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Today, we're going to do Stormburst Hierophant and put that together. I know that that's a really good build. The question is, can it feel good on a low enough budget? That's what we're going to try to answer today, probably tomorrow on stream as well. And yeah, also I'm going to try to go back to having daily uploads. So I'm going to be here. Subscribe if you just want the daily uploads and the daily download of what I'm doing. So you can, be going for your run and exercising and living your life, touching that grass and getting the download of what's going on. That's it for me. Quick little download of what I've been up to, or kind of a long ramble of what I've been up to. Just giving you guys all the detail, my thoughts so far. And yeah, gonna keep working at it, get you guys a good league starter for 324. And yeah, see you guys soon. Goodbye.